Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of IPCS Parallax. Today, we'll be discussing Bangladesh's ongoing political crisis, and we have with us Dr. Ali Riaz. Dr. Riaz was formerly heading Bangladesh's Constitutional Reform Commission and is currently the vice chair of the National Consensus Commission. For those of you who might remember, Dr. Riaz participated in a previous Parallax episode this time last year, where we discussed Bangladesh, but in light of the 2024 general elections and Sheikh Hasina's return to power. In spirit of a sequel, we are very, very happy to have Dr. Riaz back with us. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Riaz, let's just get right into it. Last year, when you were speaking, you said that under Sheikh Hasina's rule, Bangladesh's democracy had digressed to a personalistic autocracy. A year on, a lot of changes have happened. So currently, how would you describe Bangladesh's democracy?
Bangladesh is standing at a crossroads. As a matter of fact, that the downfall of Sheikh Hasina and the personalistic autocratic regime that she led, it was a popular uprising, unprecedented popular uprising, and almost unthinkable violence and atrocities that was perpetrated, especially in the 3 weeks between mid-July and early August, that has led to this uprising, and she had to flee the country. Since then, an interim government is in power, headed by the Nobel laureate, Professor Muhammad Yunus. But at this point, it's a crossroad, I say, because it is a transition. What we have seen over the last 16 years under Sheikh Hasina regime is the decimation of all the state institutions, every single bit of it. Take the police. It has been politicized, partisan in a manner that its loyalty remained with the leader, quote-unquote leader, not the state. Look at the public administration. If you look at the election commission, for example, sham elections, one after another, were organized by, even calling them election is a bit of stretch. So now it is part of rebuilding those things. That is what the interim government is trying to do, And it's a bit of challenge because, on the one hand is, how can you do something that would undo 16 years? So, it's not that you have a magic wand and you can just wave it and things would get better. So they are facing challenges. On the other hand is the subversive acts of the previous regime, the loyalists of the previous regime. Sheikh Hasina herself was fled and now has taken refuge in India. Through her videos are, making insightful remarks, incendiary remarks that she's making, and describe those who have been on the streets and even currently in power, describing them as terrorists. All these things shows that she has not accepted the reality that actually has taken place. So these are the challenges, but it is a potential moment, a very significant historical, potential, transformative moment, whether Bangladesh should move towards democracy. Because institutions have to be rebuilt. And there has to be an election because this is an interim government. It will have to hand over power to a political one. But it's not a simple caretaker government that, okay, we are here organizing an election, because they need to reform the state apparatuses, institutions. That's why the government appointed in last September, first a set of 6 commissions. One of them, which I had the privilege and honor to lead, that is Constitutional Reform Commission. The others were public administration, judiciary, police, electoral system, and there are a few others which have been established later. The 6 commissions recommendations are the ones that needs to be implemented in some form going forward. That is the transformative movement. There are recommendations that would transform the Bangladeshi state. It is absolutely necessary. And so that is where I see the potential. Everyone realizes that state institutions have been shaped in such a manner. Constitution have been mutilated in a manner that it creates an autocracy. You cannot simply have an election and transfer power to the political party or whoever wins. You have to make changes. The best part is this. There's an unwavering commitment from the political parties across the spectrum that we need to make changes. We need to make changes in constitution. We need to make changes in how the elections are held, how the judiciary operates, because without an independent judiciary, you cannot expect democracy to function properly. So this is the potential, this is the thing that we are trying to do at this point. As you mentioned, that I have been asked, again, it's an honor, to be the vice chair of a commission called National Consensus Commission, which is headed by Professor Yunus. So we are a 7-member commission. What we have done and we're trying to do is to work with the political party regarding the recommendation. That's why today, if you're calling the state of democracy in Bangladesh, it is at the crossroad heading towards that. And the opportunities, the possibilities, the enormous possibilities. And let's see where it takes us, because as I mentioned, political parties across the board, as well as people, want to see changes so that there is a system of governance which is accountable, which doesn't create an autocratic system. An independent judiciary, they want to see. Those are the challenges, those are the potential, those are the possibilities.
Right. So at this very transformative crossroads that the country is standing now, could you help us with 3 domestic priorities that the Bangladesh government has right now? And really to tag on to that question, I think the last time that we spoke, one of the main domestic priorities that you highlighted for the then Hasina government was the legitimacy crisis that it was facing, owing to the fact that there was unfair elections and the mandate was not a true public mandate. But technically, this current government also does not have an electoral mandate. So does the legitimacy concern, is that still as central in terms of domestic priorities?
Absolutely not. The reason I say absolutely not is because what is the legitimacy? Legitimacy is the one that is accepted by the people, and people give the power, right? What is election, as a matter of fact? Election is to get the mandate from the people. But when the entire political system was vitiated, corrupted, and decimated, electoral system became the tool for basically holding it as if it is necessary. From there, what we have seen, people have spoken. They couldn't speak through the election because the election system was there. They couldn't speak through the regular public demonstration and other thing because of these repressive measures that have been taken by the regime, Hasina regime. They spoke through the popular uprising. So the legitimacy of this government lies with the popular uprising. This is the mandate they have. And that's why all the political parties, irrespective of their ideological orientation, call it left, call it centrist, call it right, everyone has come together. The popular uprising that we saw in July and August was led by the students, younger people, but it was participated by all political parties. And so this legitimacy of this interim government lies with the popular uprising, people's mandate that they have expressed. If you're calling it in terms of the simply juridico-legal understanding, it is also so, because what happened is that Supreme Court, under the Article 106, it says that the president has the authority to take measures during this interim period to have a government. Because look, this is unprecedented.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister, her cabinet fled. Members of the parliament fled. Governor of the central bank fled.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, the Imam, Khatib of the National Mosque, he fled. I mean, this is unprecedented situation. So this is juridical legal point is that through 106, Article 106, Supreme Court has said this is a legitimate government. But that is just the legal part of it. Most important legitimacy of this government is the people, people's uprising, people's aspiration. that was expressed through this movement, a mass upsurge.
The leadership right now is reflective of the political uprising that took place a few months ago. Right. Okay. So, what are the three domestic priorities that this government then should pay heed to at the moment?
At this point, there are three priorities for the government. When it started, let me take a step back. When it started in August, the first thing that faced challenge is restoring the law and order, because the police, which is absolutely necessary for local law and order situation, many of them had to flee because they participated in the atrocities. Many of them fled because they were recruited based on their political loyalty rather than the performance. So it was a broken law and order situation, right? We have seen some incidents at the very beginning in August and moving into September. So the first challenge at that point was the law and order situation. Now, 7 months later, where also they faced immediate another challenge that they face is the price hike, economic crisis. But of those two major challenges, but they did very well in terms of the market situation. This is Ramadan. Usually during this period, price hike of essential thing is a very common thing for the last 20, 30 years. This is the first time we haven't seen that. Government has managed to do it. The law situation has improved, significantly improved, but still there are challenges. Challenges because on the one hand, as I mentioned, you have to rebuild things. The second thing is there is a provocation from outside, disinformation campaign that is being, pretty much organized, orchestrated, and coming from India. And then there are loyalists who are trying to destabilize the situation. And this is basically because of Sheikh Hasina is continuously doing this, inciting people. Having said all these things, that the continuing challenge in terms of the priorities, the first priority of the government at this point is to deliver justice, bringing the perpetrators of crimes against humanity to the book, because they need to be put on trial. And if you look at the report of the United Nations, what do we see? This is an independent fact-finding international organization like United Nations came, did independently and found 1,400 people have been killed. And most importantly, in many instances, these were directed by then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She instructed her Home Minister and Party Chief, Party Secretary General, those sort of things. So that is number one priority. Number two priority is to ensure that the future pathway doesn't lead into this totalitization again, meaning that they have to create an institution, make reforms. Those are the second one. And then the third priority, obviously, is governance. Governance issue is the daily issues. In some cases, this governance performance, you can be very critical of that. I'm not very, I would say, they're happy with all the things that is taking place. In some cases, there are serious limitations, serious, I would say, inadequacies of this government. But we have to see it from the larger picture, that there are other priorities, other challenges they are facing.
So, as long as we're talking about priorities, this transition also saw some amount of violence after the change in government had happened, and some of it even took a communal turn. So, where does this stand, and what role does this play in the larger struggle for national unity, especially at such a fragile time for the country?
Few things have happened immediately after this uprising. For understandable reason, there are chaos, there are incidents of violence, and I say understandably because look, 16 years of repression, 3 weeks of atrocities. People have their legitimate grievances. In some cases, those are abused by some small quarters. That has been tamed. Has it been controlled completely? Most of it. Would I say I would like to see that it's completely gone. There are incidents where we have seen mazars are being attacked, or some crimes, petty crimes have gone up. We'd like to see those things, dealt with. So that being said, if you look at the number of incidents, you'd see that it has dwindled substantially. When one incident takes place, that is one too many. There are incidents of rape that we have seen. There are incidents that we have seen women being harassed. But at the same time, if you look at the people, the popular resistance to it, you have seen how women have came out on the street, how the other political parties have committed themselves that this cannot be tolerated anymore. Some people wanted to take advantage of it. And I would not consider them by their quote-unquote political ideology, because these are criminal acts, plain and simple criminal act. However you try to justify it, it's unjustifiable. Harassing women, or raping women, those are criminal act, and government need to act, and government is trying to do it in all instances. Are they succeeding in all instances? No, I'm not saying that they're succeeding. They need to be more robust, more, I would say, be asserting their authority. There, in some cases, there are inadequacies, failings. But it is not that Bangladesh has, plunged into an anarchy. The life is going on, everyone is doing what they need to do. State is functioning and functioning well. In terms of economy, is it getting better? No, it should not get better, because first of all, we have seen that how for the last 16 years the data have been manipulated, and also a kleptocratic system was created. So untangling them is a challenge. And in case of an interim government, investors tend to be a little bit wary that what would happen 6 months, 9 months, a year down the line, when the new government comes in particular, will they keep on doing this? So they're a little bit cautious on this. I would have done the same thing. But the government has addressed a major issue in terms of economy. The enormous debt that Bangladesh incurred through 16 years, and most of these are being looted. Now, government has to pay back those external loans. They have started doing it. They're doing very good. The inflow of resources, money from larger multilateral bodies are not coming in a huge amount, yet the government is managing the economy and also paying off the debts. So in terms of those are the things I would say, yes, it's a bit of challenge. It is not 100% successful, I would say. But to portray it as if everything is falling apart is, farther from the truth, as far as you can go.
It's absolutely right. Incidents cannot be used as an example of anarchy in general. But perhaps we could speak a little more to the fact that I'm raising this point about the communal violence once again, because, like I said, when India is standing at such a transformative time for the country, and relations are so fragile between the state and the people, and in general, because, like you've mentioned multiple times, we've come out of 16 years of an entirely different kind of faith, and Bangladesh is trying to build an entirely different kind of society. So when we're looking at these instances, is it helpful to look at them just as crimes, or would they benefit from specific attention paid to the fact that the nature of the crime speaks to something bigger?
I would say most of them are criminal acts. These are criminal acts. Are there larger issues here? I mean, some people are trying to take advantage of the situation, and some people are exaggerating this thing for a political. Now, with respect to going back to your previous question with respect to the national unity, when you are in a popular uprising of 16 years of repression, more than 3 weeks of unprecedented atrocities, what do you see? People come together, irrespective of their political ideology, irrespective of their affiliation of any kind of political organization. Then when you couple that regime, you pursue your own political goals. Right? So there are differences. The beauty of democracy is the differences, right? So yes, there are issues where the political parties are making their points which are different from each other, unlike 5th of August or 6th of August or 7th of August. That is I would call the right way to move. And that's why we're trying to come up with a national consensus through the National Consensus Commission. We intend to have a national charter at the end of the conversation. That would be the guide to the future of Bangladesh. That would be the way the Bangladesh should move in the coming years, and all political parties should make a commitment to it. We are hoping that hope would get there, but we need to make that effort. That is what, and the political parties are working with us. Political parties have expressed their unwavering support for the change. It is the degree that they differ, how soon the election should take place,
Right.
Those are the questions that they are actually having differences, debates, and discussion. That's good. That's absolutely good for democracy.
Right. Okay, so onwards to the next one. So these past few months have also seen what seemingly looks like an effort to redefine Bangladesh's identity, especially when there's questioning of historical symbols like Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his memory. So what do you think is driving this shift in terms of evolving historical values of the country?
The question of identity, if you look at the last 53 years, let us, what did we see? What we saw is that there is a contrived contestation between two identities. I call it contrived contestation because for centuries, Bangladeshis have embraced multiple identities. Being an Hindu and being in Bangladesh and Bangladeshi is not conflicting. Neither being a Muslim and being a Bangladeshi should be contesting ideas. These are part and parcel of ours. These are the part and parcel of the community. They live together. Individuals embrace different kind of identities, and their practices are very syncretistic. So all these things were there. Now, in some cases, it was portrayed in a political manner, as if they're contesting, as if being a Muslim doesn't make you a Bengali. Ethnically, being a Bengali and being a Muslim, and from a religious point of view, and then a Bangladeshi citizen, where does it conflict? Nowhere. Being a Hindu, being Bengali, at the same time, being a Chakma, being a Myanmar, what are the conflicts? So in some measures, these identity debates seems to be contrived in the manner because you are trying to create an identity, a very monolithic identity. Being Bengali is a monolithic identity. The nation state that has emerged in 1971 is not only for the Bengali population, people who are non-Bengali, different kind of ethnicity, different kind of nationality, they fought. They're part of it. And when we create a state, it should be more encompassing, more inclusive in terms of bringing it. Yet there are instances, it has been politicized, used as a tool. So we have to be cognizant of that. It has been used. But I don't think portraying that as a contesting one is absolutely the right way to do or do the right thing. We have to be very accommodative, very inclusive, very much acknowledging the diversity and pluralism that exists in this country. Now, under certain circumstances, when there are social upheaval, you can easily see that some people try to push their identity, push their agenda. Have we seen that one? Yes, we have seen that in the last 16 years as well. We have seen this homophobia. We have seen that they're thrust on a specific identity that you have to adopt it through the state. That we have seen. Right? So now that shackle is gone, the state is not doing it. So the diverse opinion, diverse ways, and there are forces, there are social forces, they're trying to do, push their identity. So we see that contestation, and eventually, would it be resolved in a monolithic way? No, it would not be resolved in a monolithic way. That would Bangladesh become, like one kind of state that everyone adopts, every individual adopts one single identity. It's not possible. That's what we are witnessing on the identity issue.
So when it comes to what's happening with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's memory in terms of...
Sorry, I didn't address that one. Let me come back to that. That history part needs to be reviewed and revisited. Why? Because, again, what was imparted through the last 16 years is a very, very narrow, very skewed interpretation of history. Take, for example, the War of Independence. Was it one person's leadership? Was it not actually people's war? Why did we see that it has been portrayed as if it is one individual's, contribution or one political party's contribution? That's a very skewed interpretation. So history, there would be multiple interpretations to history, but the state machinery was used to impose one certain interpretation, and you cannot disagree with that. If you do, there are laws that would actually prevent you from doing that. There would be persecution for that. People have been prosecuted for that kind of thing. And it has stymied the historical studies even in academic arena, people couldn't talk. So we'll have to revisit, because, Bangladesh has come a long way. 53 years is not a small time. This is time to look back and see how this, when we are talking about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, we have to acknowledge the role that he played as a Bengali nationalist leader until 1970. No one can question that. But at the same time, we cannot simply ignore the fact that post-1972, what we have seen is the decimation of and the emergence of a personalistic autocracy under his one-party state was created. So that needs to be understood too. And the same ideology, when it came back with Sheikh Hasina, it is imperative that we question that ideology. It is imperative that we look into the history in this manner. And we cannot, by no means we can ignore 1970. By no means we can, because that is the foundation of this country. Without 1970. But at the same time, we have to see that what happens post-70. We have to understand the political dynamics. We have to see how the aspirations of the War of Independence was completely ignored. The War of Independence, the proclamation of independence, what equality, and then it talked about social justice and human dignity. Where had those been? If you're talking about that, okay, we are talking about the spirit of the liberation war, as Awami used to say, but the spirit was the equality, human dignity, social justice. You cannot have an authoritarian regime and claim that that is equality, that is human dignity. Right?
But to that, so what essentially we're seeing is that removing someone from the pedestal of a hero is the first step in looking at history a little more objectively, so that it creates a lot more space, a more inclusive space for the others to find what their identity as a Bangladeshi, as a Bengali means. Yeah, that point is well taken. So for a moment, I'd like to go back to India and discuss India-Bangladesh ties. And I think this is something that you've said repeatedly, and I got very interestingly phrased that India-Bangladesh relations are too close for comfort. That's how you've characterized them. And the anti-India sentiment that I think we discussed in our previous conversation as well, it's become a lot more evident in the past few months. So what is your current reading of India-Bangladesh bilateral ties on ground and diplomatically as well?
If I put it this way, the ball is in the court of New Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
They have to understand, the policymakers and the analysts and politicians should understand that Bangladesh as an independent country and its popular aspiration has spoken. Mm-hmm. It is not that we can simply change the geography. Can we change the geography? We cannot. Neighborhood is there. but it has to be based on, the relationship has to be based on state to state, not state versus one individual. The relationship has to be on the mutual respect. Size matters, but size in this case should not, by any way, undermine the mutual respect of two independent countries. For the last 16 years, what we have seen is a relationship between India and a political party, and it has came down to one individual. Look, the way Sheikh Hasina has been treated when she fled the country and landed in India. Ajit Doval welcomed her, right? Have you ever seen that a country is hosting a deposed leader who fled his country by a state official? No, you wouldn't see that one anywhere. No, anywhere. Ben Ali fled from Tunisia, or there are other instances where we have seen. Look, even lately, Bashar al-Assad left, right? He fled. Did we see where he landed? Were there any government officials standing on the airport to receive? No. So India made that decision. Unfortunately, that decision has been made a long time ago, that they would rather prefer to have a relationship with one political party, one individual, than the country itself. Now, the anti-India sentiment that you have mentioned, I would put it this way, that the Bangladeshis would like to see they're treated with dignity as an independent country. That is what they're telling. It is seen as anti-Indian because just the India's role was contrary to that. Dignified, independent country. Legitimate claims on the water issue, the border issue, could have been dealt with if you have considered that, yes, this is an independent country. Let's deal this with, dignity to each other. That has not. Economic part, I would just scale for the moment that what kind of benefit the Indian, establishment and Indian companies have made. But most important part is political. That now, today, why it appears that it is very much anti-Indian. Because for the last 16 years, even if you say anything, legitimate criticism of India resulted in persecution. So now people can speak their speech. Bangladeshis do not want to, do harm to India. Bangladeshis want that India would not do harm to Bangladesh as well. They would be treated equally. They would be treated as an independent country. They would be treated with dignity. And when there are legitimate concerns, to be addressed properly.
I'd just like a small follow-up question to that. The relationship between Bangladesh and India has been quite cyclical in terms of what party is in power, in the sense that not just the fact that India prefers a certain party over the other, but the very reverse could also be said, that the Awami League has had a certain disposition towards India, and the BNP has had a leaning, well, not necessarily in favor of India, to put it mildly. So does this cyclical nature also affect is the current nature of bilateral relations? Do we see that is that also a result of the cyclical nature, or because there don't seem to me at this point any long-term benefits of this constant back and forth between both parties in Bangladesh at least?
First of all, this characterization, let me raise some concern with respect to that Awami League is leaning towards India and BNP is leaning towards Pakistan. Let's get out of that. Let's look at the reality. For the last 16 years, when Awami League was in power, it is not only league, actually. It is more than that. Even if I quote Sheikh Hasina, she at one point said, we have given more to India than we actually got, in the sense that I don't expect anything in return. So that unequal relationship that we need to understand. Is it good to have this kind of relationship that we are referring to, that current situation, if not hostility, the disinformation campaign coming out of India's, New Delhi and other places, all the media and all sorts. Is it good? It's absolutely not good. Do Bangladeshis want it? I can assure you, I know I am not a representative of anybody in the sense that nobody elected me to do so. But being someone on the ground, be understanding this as much as I can understand this country, where I was born, which I have studied, I can tell you nobody wants that. Nobody. Is there a small fringe group? Might be, but in every society there are. That's not the point. The point is that, you know, who would make that determination that this should not continue? That's why at the beginning I said the ball is in the court of New Delhi. They have to make the decision. You are harboring someone who has committed crimes against humanity. That's not my word. They said, I'm quoting from your UN report, that the regime had committed crimes against humanity. Command responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. And she's being harbored and allowed to speak against the government of the neighboring country called Bangladesh, right? Is that a good gesture for a good relationship? It's not. Our Bangladesh, as I said, the Bangladeshis would like to see that as a neighbor, India respected its, independence and can have a mutually beneficial relationship. Mutually beneficial because, yes, Bangladesh has an interest in Northeast India in the sense that this is a huge market, a potential market. Bangladesh has grown. That could be tapped. Bangladesh could have access to India through Nepal. That would help. But on the other hand, what did we see? These things didn't happen. Bangladesh provided the passage through Bangladesh, right? Call it transit, some call it corridor, however you put it. That access has been given. Did Bangladesh get anything out of it? Bangladesh wanted for the water sharing thing. What happened with the Tista? What happened with the Ganges River? The treaty is coming to an end. And the last 25 years is not very good in terms of the records, right? With respect to water sharing, the commission that was set up, that didn't meet even. Look, for a decade, we haven't seen that there have been meeting on the water sharing issues. So, it is apparently is anti-Indian. Of course, there are French groups, but I would not portray it in that way. I would rather say that Bangladeshis are speaking. Let India make the decision.
So what we are seeking to do now is not before or not for a country, but change the structure of relations that have existed between Bangladesh and India in a way that it is mutually beneficial, as you've mentioned, but that gives Bangladesh more space and allows it a certain standing that you think has not been accorded before.
It has not been. Look, I mean, this unequal relationship, the reality has emerged. Accept the reality. That might not be to your liking. What is happening in say in other countries, I might not like it. Does it? Do I like to see that India is moving away from its democratic credential, being labeled as an authoritarian regime by the Freedom House or VDAM? I don't, because I would like to see India being very democratic. Does that mean I'm going to continuously incite people within India to create havoc so that the state cannot function? That's not the relationship exists, right? That is the point that India. Let me give you one quick example how India's behavior annoys Bangladesh. Last year, 2024, in January, there was a so-called election, right? Leading to the election, Indian government officials repeatedly insisted that Bangladesh's election is Bangladesh's domestic affairs. Understood? Now, Indian policymakers and their representatives are repeatedly saying there should be an election immediately in Bangladesh and we'll talk to the elected representative only. Didn't you say less than a year ago on January when Hasina was stage managing an election, that it is the domestic affairs, the internal affairs of Bangladesh. Why it is not an internal affairs for Bangladesh now? Because Sheikh Hasina is not in power. Is it because she had to face this wrath of the people, which she deserved? Again, when we talk about Sheikh Hasina, we need to understand she has committed crimes against humanity. She has the command responsibility of that.
So the partisan nature of dealings is brought into question, which is, well, in my personal opinion as well, is something that India has done, not just with Bangladesh, with other countries as well, in terms of who it chooses to deal with, who is in power. So when power changes, it's always slightly uncomfortable. And that's a transition for us to go through. But the partisan nature is something that you've highlighted very well. So bringing perhaps to the last couple of questions that I have with regards to the international priorities for Bangladesh right now. And I'd like to draw particular attention to Myanmar for a second. I think the last time that we spoke, you highlighted that Bangladesh does not have a concerted Myanmar policy. And again, interestingly, you quoted them as being neighbors who don't know each other too well. So while we're talking about international priorities, how high does Myanmar feature in that list?
Myanmar features significantly now because of the evolving situation in Myanmar, particularly in the border, in the Arakan state. Given that Arakan army is advancing and has pretty much established control over the border, and most of it, if not all. So Bangladesh will have to take a different posture, different approach to it. I have been recommending since the Arakan army's rise, that there should be a new approach to that country. Bangladesh didn't take that one under Sheikh Hasina regime. At this moment, given that it's an interim government, what it is trying to do is, first of all, maintaining status quo so that it doesn't spill into Bangladesh, because the conflict that we have seen is expanding. Arakan Army's success is pretty much everyday news, kind of. And the regime is not exactly, the Myanmar regime is not actually has complete control over the entire country. But for Bangladesh, what happens beyond Arakan is a little bit obscure, it doesn't matter. So the government, interim government, seems to me, is trying to maintain the status quo to begin with, and then try to see what are the other options they have. Because it has a geopolitical significance too. China is involved in this. India has made very clear support to the government of Myanmar, and it has its own economic interest in the Arakan region. So these are the complexities of it. Now, Bangladesh, on the other hand, its own economic necessities and other things put it in a very close contact with the Western countries, where they have a different approach toward Myanmar, right? Now, with the change in Washington, with Trump administration, we don't know yet. We don't know what would be the approach towards Myanmar, because Burma Act was created later, and U.S. government was somewhat involved in these measures, but now it would be a different. So it's a very complex situation. The Myanmar-Bangladesh relationship has entered into very complex. Interim government would like to see, as far as I understand, the stability maintains, no new challenges, no new flood of refugees coming in. Already more than 1 million people are already here. Recently, as you have seen, UN Secretary General came, Professor Yunus took him to the Rohingya refugee camps where they had iftar with 100,000 refugees. What they expect one thing: go back home with dignity. That's it. There's nothing more that the Rohingya refugees want. It is, I would not describe it as a pardon, because refugees cannot be pardoned to anybody. They didn't chose to come here. Nobody becomes refugee on their own choice. But it is becoming a very difficult economic issues. Now, the support for Rohingyas are dwindling, and we have seen the food ration has been reduced. It will be reduced beginning the 1st of April. All these things are very complicated. This needs to be looked into very closely. It's a challenge for the interim government. It's a very complex situation and a very challenging task.
In terms of maintaining stability, do you think that opening channels of discussion with parties in Myanmar across where they stand politically, and having not just the ones that are in power, because there is no one person in power in Myanmar. So just having conversations, opening channels of discussion, regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum, how much power they have, something that we were just advising India to do in terms of not being partisan, but opening all sorts of channels. Do you think that is
Bangladesh
something
has
that can be
that
helpful?
possibility. Sorry for interjecting you.
Yeah.
Bangladesh has that possibility. And I understand that at the informal level, there has been some communication with the Arakan army to see, because that is the imminent thing. Geographically, politically, in all respects, the Arakan army is at the doorstep of Bangladesh, right? That needs to, they cannot simply be ignored, you know. So I understand the Bangladesh government has started some informal communication established with the Arakan army and others, you know. On the other hand, given that state-to-state relationship, look, there is a government in Myanmar. They have to work with them. But more they recalibrate this towards accepting the reality, working with the Arakan army, ensuring that the border security is ensured, and stability in the sense that there is no new flow of refugees coming in, rather, if possible, in some ways, some of them are returned.
As I understand, Bangladesh's national policy in terms of the Rohingya refugees remains unchanged. Bangladesh as a country is still vying for sustainable repatriation of the Rohingya into Myanmar.
Absolutely.
Which is a very bold position to take, given that the onus now is on Myanmar and its authorities to provide a rights-based approach to find a political solution for the Rohingya issue.
It is. I mean, Bangladesh has to work in a two-track manner. Right? On the one hand, is that working with the Myanmar government to see whether there is a possibility that repatriation will take place. Likelihood is very slim, because the question is political question. In case of Myanmar, it's a political question, acknowledging the citizenship of the Rohingya community members, right? Which they're unwilling to do, and more they are under pressure because of these various groups. They are fighting and taking away lands from the central government. They are becoming, on the one hand, they're becoming fragile, but also they are actually becoming steadfast that we'll have to protect what we have done. In case of Bangladesh, that's why I said it's a very complex and challenging test for the government. But it needs to, and I hope they're doing what I've heard informally, that they are having some communication with the Arakan army, so that it is practically, if nothing improves, at least it doesn't get worse. That's not a small task at this point in a very evolving, very volatile situation.
So that's all I have. I think we've reached the end of this discussion. Thank you, Dr. Riaz, as usual. It's fantastic speaking to you. Thank you for making the time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.